Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. I am having a great one. We are here in Minecraft 1.21.6. the Chase the Skies drop, and already I can see there's a couple of subtle differences about the environment. Is the background looking a little bit more washed out to you? That's because there's now a slight difference in the way that fog is rendered, it seems like, and a bit more environmental atmospheric fog will occur at longer distances, but still within your render distance. I'm going to fly up into the air just to take a quick look at this because yeah, it feels like the world is kind of mistier. I'm not certain I like that so much, so maybe we can do something about that in a resource pack or something in the near future, or maybe I should just be expanding my render distance as they refactor how rendering works. We're not going to dwell on that for too long, though, because we have a mission in the Nether. The major feature of the Chase the Skies update is, of course, the Happy Ghast, and the Happy Ghast's life cycle starts by you seeking out a soul sand valley to find a Dried Ghast block. Obviously, in this world where I've built up the world over time and a lot of this has already been loaded, I'm not likely to find a Dried Ghast block anywhere in the nearby Soul Sand Valley, so I'm going to fly out, take a trip to as far away as I can to find a fresh new Soul Sand Valley, and with any luck, we should hopefully find a Dried Ghast block nestled within one of the bone structures that you see around us here. So without further ado, I'm going to fly off into the depths of the Nether in a direction I don't normally travel. Hopefully it won't be too long before I encounter a brand new Soul Sand Valley that I've never visited before, and then we can start talking about the Dried Ghast. Here's a question for all you budding Minecraft survivalists out there. What is the telltale sign that you have not traveled out to an area of the Nether before? In my experience, it is the fact that lava is still falling from the ceiling and has yet to reach the ground or the lava lake below. Usually when you see lava sources still updating, that's a surefire sign that you haven't explored this part of the Nether before. And the other surefire sign in this case is sitting right over there amidst those bones. Just behind the skull of that zombie piglin, you will see there is an unfamiliar block. In fact, I still find it kind of strange calling these blocks, because to me they aren't blocks at all. They are the first sign of a new life form. This is a Dried Ghast block, and right now it's not making much in the way of noise. It is emitting a puff of smoke every so often, and it looks quite similar to the bone blocks around it, but distinct enough that you can find it and pick it up. We're going to silk touch this little lad, and there we go. He's in the inventory now as a Dried Ghast, which, yes, technically is a building block. You can place it down, you can build with it if you want to. Maybe you want to use him as a face for a statue or something like that. It'd be a little bit strange, but you could do it. There we go. There are multiple of them around here in these unvisited bone structures. You won't always find them next to the small ones in my experience. It seems like the larger ones are much more likely to have a Dried Ghast generating amongst them. And we are 3 for 3 on that theory. There we go. We've got another one right there, and that is 3 Dried Ghasts. They stack up in the inventory, and we're going to bring those back home with us because they don't like it here in the Nether all that much, it turns out, because they have been dried out. As you can see from my inventory, I have been fighting the occasional Ghast as we've traveled through the Nether. Those Ghasts are, of course, the angry kind, and they're sort of known for crying and whimpering, and once you kill them, they drop a Ghast tear. These little Dried Ghasts seem to have cried themselves out. They're basically dehydrated, and so the goal here is to rehydrate them by reintroducing them to water. Something you can't do here in the Nether because you can't place water sources at all. So that's why we'll be taking these Dried Ghasts back to the overworld if, and only if, I can find my way home. Because we've traveled about 3,000 blocks here in the Nether in order to get out to a Soul Sand Valley I hadn't explored before, and it's going to be a bit of a labyrinthine way to find my way home. And here we are, back in the newly mistier environment of the overworld, where we can help this Happy Ghast rehabilitate. We can make him into a much more productive member of society, instead of the grumpy ones in the Nether that are going to shoot you out of the air with fireballs half of the time. And what better place to do that than in our newly refurbished set of mountain lakes. We've been working on terraforming this a little while ago. Obviously, it's been a little while since we've been back in Survival Guide, but I like the idea of popping down a Dried Ghast Ghast somewhere under the surface here and just allowing them to hydrate, because we get the advancement Stay Hydrated, which puts us on the road to rehabilitating this Happy Ghast. If I open up my advancements tree here, I think it's probably going to be in husbandry somewhere. Yes, there we go. It's here. That's the advancement for placing a Dried Ghast block into water, and I expect there are some other advancements for Happy Ghasts, but first of all, we've got to wait for them to hatch, or whatever you would call this process, because it is a long process. It's going to take about 20 minutes for your Dried Ghast to turn into a Ghastling, but slowly but surely you will see particles emitting from them when they rehydrate, and that little frowny expression that they have right now is going to turn more neutral and then slightly happier as the water starts to flood into all of whatever this thing is made out of. Now, we do have 3 other Dried Ghasts in my inventory. I'm actually going to keep a couple of them for later. We can have them as backups. Inhumane though it may seem to keep them in this dried form, don't worry about it. They're a block. They're in your inventory. It's nothing to worry about. We're going to raise these 2 up from their dehydrated state into a helpful and productive member of society, and we're also going to take a look at what your options are if you can't get hold of a freshly generated soul sand valley in your world. Because you might have heavily explored your nether already and not have a soul sand valley within easy reach, or alternatively you might have a world border in place. Whether you're playing on a Minecraft server or a single player world, you might have to limit the world size for whatever reason, which might make it feel like the Dried Ghast is slightly out of your reach. Well, do not worry, it is perfectly possible to get hold of them, at least in a regular survival world. Peaceful players might have to go looking in the Nether, but for anybody playing on any other difficulty, there is a chance that you can actually craft a Dried Ghast block using 8 Ghast tears and a single piece of soul sand. There we go, the Dried Ghast crafting recipe already appears in our recipe book since we've obtained them as a block already. 8 Ghast tears and a piece of soul sand will allow you to craft a Dried Ghast so that you can raise your own Happy Ghast, even if you can't find one out there in the Nether. The third and final option will require me to switch to my golden helmet, because we need to go and do a little bit of piglin bartering. And I will admit that my world is not set up such that I have an automatic bartering setup, or even really a great way of getting gold beyond going mining for it out there in the mesa biomes, or alternatively here in the Nether. But if we go up to a piglin and right click on them with a gold ingot, they will be interested in bartering something for that. And now, in addition to the other bartering options that piglins already gave you, there is a chance to receive a Dried Ghast as a bartering item. So once this piglin stops running away from all of the zombified piglins around, we're going to see how easy it is to get hold of that. I'll drop a bunch of gold ingots on the ground. This piglin will just pick them up one by one and trade me whatever he feels like it is worth. And chances are a Dried Ghast could appear in that. There is one! Fantastic! That was the second barter we got. That's absolutely incredible work on this piglin's part. And you know what? I'm going to reward him by letting him have the rest of this gold and seeing what else he throws me in the process. While he's doing that, I've been looking it up on the Minecraft wiki, and it seems like the Dried Ghast only has about a 2.13% chance of being the bartered item, about the same as you get for bottles of water or potions of fire resistance. So honestly, I'm quite surprised we got a Dried Ghast that quickly, but you know what? I'll take it. I can be very, very happy about that. And once we've stashed away some of the leftover nether quartz that he gave me, and fire charges and leather and things like that, we can go back to our pond and wait for the Dried Ghasts to fully rehydrate into a Ghastling. Little update for you, the Ghast's expression is now very neutral. Compare this little guy, oh no, that guy just changed as well. And you saw it in the subtitles very briefly there, it did say Dried Ghast feels better. So we are most of the way, I think, done with them rehydrating, and hopefully pretty soon one of them should pop out into a Ghastling. Okay, this is too adorable not to capture on camera. Look at him! They're so happy! This one just ended up getting a little happier as well. I think we are probably 5 minutes away from them fully hatching into a Ghastling, and I call it hatching because honestly, I can't really think of a better word for it. But man, it's kind of cute seeing them do this. They do change state every 5 minutes. From what I understand, this is a consistent timing, so people have already made redstone clocks out of this process, which are a little bit brutal because they involve hydrating the Happy Ghast very briefly and then dehydrating it again to allow the timer to reset. But honestly, I'm just happy to see them grow into slightly more happy beings. One more stretch to go and we should see them rehydrate, evolve, hatch. I'm not sure what to call it still, but we should see them do that very, very shortly. One of them's hatched! One of them's already done it, and we get to see the other one do that because I presume it happens at the same time. Weird though that was offset because I placed that one before that one. Maybe that's some sort of quirk of chunk loading, or maybe it is genuinely just a bit more random now than it was when people were making timers out of it. Either way, just listen to the little noises they make. They kind of sound like seagulls, to be honest. I live in Brighton, there's a lot of seagulls around here, and they all sort of sound like that, but now we have this little fella, hopefully should be popping out in around the same time. Obviously, it hasn't really worried too much about being in the water, and I've already gone and collected the thing that we're going to use to tempt these little Happy Ghasts to fly around. This is a Ghastling, by the way. You can tell that it's a Ghastling because of the pink gills on the sides. It's really interesting what these mean about ghast biology and stuff. But anyway, they are tempted by using snowballs and can even be encouraged to grow up a little faster if you feed them a snowball. So not only are they rehydrated by this, but they like cold stuff. It's kind of the antithesis of what happens to them in the Nether, I suppose, with all the fire and everything around in that dehydrating environment. But hopefully it's just a couple more seconds before this one. Yes, there we go. Oh, look at you. And we have a perfect pair of Ghastlings. Now, the thing about these, of course, is that you cannot breed them. Obviously, they're baby animals right now, so you couldn't breed them anyway. But once they are full-size Happy Ghasts, you can't breed them with snowballs, even though the snowballs are their preferred type of food. Instead, they are crafted in the way that you saw me craft them earlier with a piece of soul sand and some ghast tears. So it's not going to be as easy as all that to get a bunch more of these. Obviously, it takes a long time for them to hatch, so they are relatively precious as far as mobs go. I mean, they're precious little faces, but for one thing, just look at them. But I think we're going to need to take good care of our Happy Ghasts because they are going to be a really useful form of transport for us. I'm actually going to encourage these two to come down from here. We're going to try and lure them in with the promise of more snowballs, but even if they don't detect a player nearby holding a snowball, they will sort of drift around the point where they hatched or the point where they were last fed a snowball. So we can actually try and tie them to a specific location. One thing you will note, though, is that they move very slowly, especially compared to some other flying mobs like, for example, allays. When they're following the player, they tend to hover down by the ground near you, but they do have a lot more vertical range. So if you're not holding a snowball, you will find that they start to drift off a little way and can drift up into the air, so it might be worth keeping them somewhere low down, close to the ground, maybe grabbing a lead and leashing them to a fence post or something so that they don't get away from you too much. I'm going to keep holding the snowball in my offhand while we sleep for the night and then switch back to the main hand to feed them a couple more times. But I'm also going to break down a couple more snow blocks, and I'm pretty sure I need a shovel for that. So let me grab a shovel that doesn't have silk touch. Should have one here in my backup gear box somewhere. Yeah, we just got an efficiency 3 shovel here. So I'm going to break these down for some more snowballs. You've also got to be careful not to throw the snowball at the Happy Ghast. You do want to right-click on it very deliberately because while snowballs won't do any damage, it is going to send the Happy Ghast into a bit of a spiral. We'll place the last few of these snow blocks and break those down into a few more snowballs. And before these little fellas get too far away, we'll continue to feed them. There we go. I did end up throwing one there by accident. But yeah, we should be able to get them to grow up into full-size Happy Ghasts before long. Once they've been fed the maximum amount of snowballs, which I think is about 6 or 7, they'll probably take another minute or so to fully grow into a Happy Ghast. So it won't be long before we get to play around with those. And in the meantime, I have to grab a couple of supplies. First of all, some leads are going to be really helpful because these two are... Oh, I think one of them may have just grown up. These two are going to be a little bit hard to keep hold of. And the other thing we need is leather because we need to craft a harness. We'll need some glass and some wool for that as well. We'll need 2 glass, 3 leather for each, and a couple of pieces of wool. Now, do I have colored wool in here? We have cyan. Let's see if I've got some blue wool anywhere. Looks like we've got blue glass there. Yes, we do have 1 piece of blue wool there. We can obviously get more from the sheep farm. Let's make a blue harness for one, and let's make a red harness for the other. Because yes, there are now 2 ghasts floating around my overworld, but of course these ghasts are looking a little bit smilier and are less interested in fireballing me, so that's a very good thing. They are also still tempted by snowballs, so they will float down towards the player if you're holding a snowball within range, and if I jump right-click on that, yeah, there you go. We ended up accidentally snowballing the Happy Ghast, but it's okay. It doesn't seem to worry that much about that. And if you're holding a harness, they're actually tempted to come down and say hello to you as well, so we should be able to, there we go, equip the harness on one of the Ghasts, and let's get the red harness onto the other one as well. There we go. All right. Well, we can still tempt them down here using snowballs. They will be drifting around a little bit. I think one of the first things I'm going to need to do with this is set up a permanent, like, garage or something that we can use to store them in so they are floating around a little bit less the rest of the time. But if I'm able to hop up next to this one and right-click on it, there we go. That's where the fun begins, because these are a form of transport for the player, a flying form of transport no less, and controllable using the WASD keys. So you can actually strafe left and right using the movement controls with A and D. You can move forwards and backwards using W and S the way you can with a player. Obviously you're a little bit slower because the ghasts are fairly slow moving. You can ascend using the jump button, but in order to go back down, you're not going to do the intuitive thing and press shift. You might be familiar with shift crouch moving you downwards when you're flying in creative mode, but if you're crouching, you actually get off the Happy Ghast and stand on its head. Now, the coolest thing about this is the Ghast will remain stationary and kind of align itself with the block grid whilst a player is standing on it like this. And if I'm holding shift to crouch, I can actually move around in effectively a 3x3 block area on top of the Happy Ghast and not fall off. So this actually makes them an ideal platform for building from, along with a couple of other things. You can imagine using them for like parkour courses, for instance. Now, if I'm able to quickly, I should be able to jump to the other Ghast, and that one will remain stationary while the blue one hovers away, and you can kind of leapfrog between the two of them, which is adorable, actually, and I think a really, really fun way of interacting with them. If you want to descend, like I was saying, you actually need to look downwards and press forwards. So in order to fully get the Ghast to land in that way, you are going to need to effectively hold forward and look down, which might take a little bit of getting used to, but trust me, the benefits are going to be so important. Take, for example, the fact that I could work on this roof edge here whilst I'm flying around on my Happy Ghast. Let's say that I wanted to change out some of the blocks inside of here. We can still float up to this, start changing out those blocks, maybe strip a couple of logs or whatever, and the Happy Ghast will actually effectively work as a platform. While you're sitting on it, it kind of rotates the angle like this, but while you're standing on it, I could just walk around, build as normal, and then get back on the Happy Ghast and float away or float downwards once I was done. They're going to be an absolutely fantastic way of taking survival mode screenshots as well if you want to get a decent angle on a build you've just done. Yeah, how about you just fly your Happy Ghast up into the air and take a screenshot from the perfect angle. The Ghast doesn't even really appear in the first person view unless you look down at a certain angle, so I can take a lovely screenshot of my beekeeper's house from here. They are slow moving, but they're going to be a fantastic way of getting up onto rooftops or onto large walls and doing a little bit of texturing or building. In fact, where I've made some fairly vertical cliffs up here on this mountain, it should be a really great way of getting up high and swapping out a couple of blocks if I don't like the texture. Let me float on down here, hop off the Happy Ghast, and let's go and grab some andesite blocks so we can do a bit more texture work on the cliff up there on Cherry Mountain. Happy Ghast is waiting for me right here. I can do a quick jump click and hop on board. You'll notice that they also fly around the area where they were last interacted with, so even though the Happy Ghast is free floating and is going to be floating around this area, sometimes off the ground and a little bit difficult for me to reach, it's not going to drift away and completely disappear. They're not going to be like bees where they can never find their way home properly. They will always migrate back to the block where they were spawned or the block where they were last interacted with. It's kind of similar to turtles, how they'll always find their way home to their home beach. It's sort of like that. Anyway, now that we are up here, we should be able to quickly break out a couple of these stone blocks. I'll hop the andesite into my hand there, and if we get a little bit closer, we can replace some of these edge blocks here with andesite. The swinging around as you change the field of view is a little bit awkward, so I'm actually going to get off the Happy Ghast here, and it's going to hover there faithfully whilst I replace some of these blocks and make the needed changes. Once I need to go up a little bit, we can get onto the Happy Ghast, and we can actually back up to elevate ourselves slightly there. There we go. I'll get off again, and we can just create another little piece of rim lighting with andesite here. I can even hover close enough that I can maybe collect a couple of those blocks that I dropped without dismounting from the Happy Ghast, although some of them might have been carried away by the water, so maybe we'll catch up with those down here in the lake below. And there we go. We've made a couple of subtle changes to the rock up there, lightening it with andesite, and it's nice and easy to get up there using the Happy Ghast. Where I think these are really going to change the game, though, is in construction of something like what I've got over here, and it's going to take a little while to get there, of course, so flying with Elytra is still going to be the fastest way to travel by air, but obviously speed is not always what you want, as in the case of some of these delicate terraforming operations and things where we want to work on floating areas. And the floating island over here is one such example. I had a really hard time scaffolding up and replacing all of these sections around here with streaks of diorite, even though I think it looks really good. I only ever did it to the front side of the island here because it was simply too labor intensive to do that all the way around. Now we have the Happy Ghast to help us with that, though the possibilities for vertical texturing are kind of through the roof, because if I decide I want to swap out a patch of this with, let's say, mossy cobblestone, we can get close enough with the Happy Ghast flying underneath here that we should be able to do that. Let's do that to an area right here where this glow lichen is forming. I think that's probably a great place to do it. Let's break out this section here. Let's build up a section with mossy cobblestone. Obviously, we've got to make sure that we have some blocks that we can place it against, and you can't place a block against the surface of the Happy Ghast itself, so that's something you need to bear in mind. We need to scoot down just a little bit here, but then we can get off again and replace a couple of those with mossy cobblestone. Yeah, we can start to create a little underhang section here. Let's scoot back up just a touch more. Just got to make sure that I'm not going to overlap too much with the ceiling and take any damage. There we go. We've got a little bit of an underhang there. And let's add a couple of azalea leaves hanging down from this patch as well, as though some plant life has been able to grow down here, especially next to this glow lichen. You can kind of blend this in with the mossy cobblestone around it. It looks like it actually snaps to the grid perfectly, as you can see right there. It's right next to where the leaves were. Took a little bit of damage as we were getting away from that, but there you go. We've just done a little bit of detailing, which would be really difficult to scaffold up and do. Obviously, you could do that in a much wider area as well, and the Happy Ghast has been so helpful in getting that to happen. So we can do a lot more to the underside of a floating island like this, which right now is primarily made out of stone blocks, just so we could get the shape in place. Honestly, I can imagine an entire flying team composed of a Happy Ghast to help you build, allays to help you collect the blocks that would drop down from this. So like if I didn't want to waste any of the stone blocks, I could just have an allay pick them up and drop them off with me in the air. And the Happy Ghast is going to casually drift around this area since that's the last area it was interacted with. It's also going to follow the player if the player gets within a certain radius, so it's going to be nice and easy to mount up again, especially if you've got Elytra and you can mount them mid-air. But naturally, this isn't the only place I can imagine using the Happy Ghast, because we've got a project that I started absolutely ages ago and then got sidetracked with a bunch of stuff I wanted to finish up here at spawn. So we're going to head back over to the Windy City. We're going to bring a couple of Dried Ghasts with us so we don't have to make this 6,000 block trip purely by the speed of the Happy Ghast, which as you can see is not very quick. But hatching a Happy Ghast over at the Windy City means we can build with height, and we can also take advantage of some other properties of the Happy Ghast because they are useful for item transport as well as just player transport. So a short time later over here in the Windy City, I have a couple of Happy Ghasts who are tied to the tops of the towers and I guess nuzzling each other mid-air. It's time to unleash these two and show you what they are fully capable of, because Happy Ghasts can be used for all sorts of things beyond just player transportation. They are really useful for mob and cargo transportation as well. Down here, a little bit earlier on, I stashed a couple of chest boats, and I'm going to bring the Happy Ghasts down, and we're going to show you how these two can interact. So let's head on up here, and let's unleash these two. Hopefully they should hover around pretty close to me. In fact, having unleashed them from that now, I'm actually holding the lead, which is really great. They have changed a little bit about lead functionality in ways that I will no doubt get into in future episodes, but for now, at least, we picked up the lead, and we can fly this one on down. I've given a cyan harness and a white harness to these two, and I haven't decided on names for any of my Happy Ghasts yet, but as usual, I'd love to get suggestions in the comments if you think there are some names that absolutely fit these. I'm thinking of naming them after the Pac-Man ghosts right now that are Pinky, Blinky, Inky, and Clyde, I think is what they're called. I forget exactly, but since they are different colorful ghosts, and the Happy Ghast is the closest we get to that in Minecraft, I think it's a pretty fun idea. So, you can leash boats. You've been able to do this in Java Minecraft for a little while, although not as long as in Bedrock Edition. And if we can get the Happy Ghast to come on down here, perhaps it'd be better if I was holding some snowballs so that we could do this. Did I leave any snowballs around here? I think I might have left them in one of these shulker boxes. Yeah, here we go. If I've got some snowballs in this hand and the lead is attached to this boat, I can hold shift and I can right-click the lead onto the boat. There you go. And the Happy Ghast will drift away with the chest boat as part of its cargo. And of course, once it goes near enough to us, we can throw anything we want to in there. Although we could always load the chest boat up before the Happy Ghast lifts it away. Now, it unfortunately isn't possible to ride the Happy Ghast underneath it from within that boat like a passenger. If a player gets into one of these boats, unfortunately, they're too heavy, and the Happy Ghast will simply lift away and the lead will end up breaking. But let's say I wanted it to bring a handful of stuff, including some stacked resources, some tools, and that kind of thing. We'll put a boat and some sticks in there as well. We just need to leash the boat up again, shift-click it onto the Happy Ghast, and immediately it picks that up and it starts flying through the air, at which point we can still mount the Happy Ghast, ride it from on top of the Happy Ghast, and the chest boat comes with us in what really feels like a hot air balloon bringing some sort of delivery. And I think the coolest part is you're not limited to simply strapping one chest boat to the underside of this Happy Ghast. You'll actually be able to attach many different things. So if you wanted, you could add a second boat in there, and there we go. The Ghast's movement is not impeded at all by carrying additional cargo like this. It's staying low to the ground right now just because of random pathfinding, but when it takes off into the air, you'll see it has no trouble bringing both boats with it, which is going to get a little bit unwieldy looking, but is certainly not a problem for the Ghast itself. And if we can mount it as a player, which I'll probably have to do from mid-air for it to be the most reliable, here we go. We can hop onto the top of the Ghast, and once again, it's lifted away into the sky with both boats actually now stacked below it. Likewise, if we dismount the Ghast to stand on it, like so, we can scoot around the top of it a little bit. The boats will stay attached underneath. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the boats' inventories at this point, and if we head down there and try to interact with the boats, of course, you end up riding them, and that would detach them from underneath the Ghast. But either way, you can at least bring a bunch of supplies with you, which means airlifting stuff to the top of a mountain if you don't have access to elytra yet is possible through the Happy Ghast. You could load these up with shulker boxes even and have them be transported up to higher heights or at long distances, as long as the boat doesn't get caught on anything and force the lead to detach, like might be possible around here with some of the blocks if the Happy Ghast tries to stay low to the ground, but most of the time they will lift off to get around obstacles and stuff like that. It's a really neat way of introducing transport mechanics into the game in a way that isn't just a single minecart chest propelled by powered rails. I'm actually going to dismount the Happy Ghast over the top of this tower over here. I'm going to get off it mid-air, and it should now save this point as the last place it was interacted with, meaning it will take this as its home and hover around in the air around the top of this tower rather than returning to the point where we leashed the boats to it. And now, yeah, you can kind of see that the boats do get stuck occasionally. Yep, there we go. It lost one on the roof there. So if you want to, you could probably dismount a little bit higher, but it's a really fun way of adding a little bit of visual life and industry to the area to have a Happy Ghast floating around with a chest boat attached to the underside of it. And as you can see, it's having no problem sticking around this area, staying at a reasonable height. We might end up dismounting it a little higher in the air just to make sure the boat doesn't scrape off on the rooftop like the other one just did. When they've got a harness on, their roaming range is about 32 blocks. When they are unharnessed, the range is about 64, but the harness is also what allows you to attach the boats to them, so it's probably something you will want to keep around. The other boat is just about staying attached, despite how much this Ghast is interacting with the rooftop around here, and hopefully these roof ornaments don't prove too much of a problem. Either way, that boat doesn't have anything in it, so if the leads end up snapping, if the boat ends up getting stuck up here, it's not the end of the world. In the meantime, we're going to unleash the other Ghast, and we're going to grab the boat that I've got with me in my inventory that doesn't have a chest attached to it to see if we can use it to airlift a mob. First of all, with my Happy Ghast in tow, kind of like a balloon, I'm going to glide my way down here, and let's see if we can shift-click to leash it to this cow. There we go. Now the cow looks like it has a balloon, and if you shift-click the Ghast lead to another animal, it will just get attached to that animal, and it won't float away too much. At this point, however, once we ride the Happy Ghast, yeah, there you go, the lead does end up breaking, so we can't carry the cow with us with that formation of lead interactions. However, if we leash the cow first and then bring the Happy Ghast down here with the snowballs. Let's see if it can get tempted if we end up standing a little bit closer. There we go. If we now shift-click with the lead to attach the cow to the Happy Ghast, there we go. Now the cow can be lifted off. So whichever mob that you attach the lead to first becomes the passenger, and the second mob that the lead is attached to is sort of the anchor point. So attaching a Ghast to a cow will keep the Ghast attached to the ground, while attaching a cow to a Ghast will allow the cow to fly through the air. And so far it seems like the Ghast has been pretty good at touching down slowly and gently so that the cow does not suffer any immediate fall damage. Let's see if it manages to touch down here. Yep, there we go, kind of scrapes the ground, and there we go, is let off into the air again. So this is a pretty safe way of transporting mobs, especially if the player is riding on top of it and you want to take this specific cow somewhere special. At this point, however, the lead breaking won't detach the ghast from the cow, so what we got to do is grab some shears and use them to shear the lead off of both creatures. If we hold some snowballs, the ghast will drift down to the ground, bringing the cow with it, and then we simply right-click with some shears, the same way you shear a sheep, and the lead will come off, allowing the cow to detach harmlessly. What if you wanted multiple animals attached? Well, of course, you could end up simply leashing 2 pigs to the underside of your ghast, but frankly, I think it's even more fun to have both those pigs in a boat. Now, I've managed to get both of them into this single boat. We should still be able to attach a lead to the boat itself instead of the pig. And once again, by tempting the Happy Ghast down towards us with snowballs, we can shift right-click on the ghast, and the 2 pigs in a boat are carried away like the cargo of the chest boat was. Once again, though, all we have to do is shear the lead off, and the boat should return harmlessly to the ground, and boats will even prevent entities inside them from taking full damage. So a lot of the time, you're going to have a much easier time transporting mobs around using the Happy Ghast this way. As we return to the top of the tower here, it looks like the other Happy Ghast does still have 1 chest boat attached, so 2 might have been a little bit ambitious, but 1 is staying there a lot more readily, and we can leash this Happy Ghast to the top of the tower over here. Incidentally, if your Happy Ghast takes damage, they will naturally regenerate a little bit of health, so if they've occasionally taken damage from like a skeleton arrow that fires at you at night whilst you're trying to pilot your Happy Ghast, then you shouldn't worry too much about that, since they do have some natural health regeneration. They even regenerate it faster when in rain or snow, or when they're flying at the height of the clouds, which I don't have enabled in my world right now, but by switching the clouds to fancy, we can see roughly where they are. It's about the top of those mountains over there. So if I end up drifting to the top of there at any point, whatever health our ghast has lost is going to be healed up pretty quickly. You can also splash them with regeneration potions or healing potions, and honestly, the regen potion is kind of an ironic one, considering that the ghast tear is an ingredient in those, but hopefully your ghast should be healthy enough. And since they are craftable, they are technically a renewable mob, even though they can't be bred. You should be able to get hold of another Happy Ghast pretty easily if one of yours happens to die in unfortunate circumstances. Now, while we're discussing lead mechanics and using the Happy Ghast as transport, I should also bring up the fact that lead mechanics have changed ever so slightly in this update. They have been made a little bit more robust. Leads will break a lot less. They're also slightly thicker to match the rendering on Bedrock Edition, and it's now possible to leash 2 animals together. In the same way that you can leash a Happy Ghast to an animal, this cow and this sheep are now bound together by this lead, and one will follow the other kind of randomly. It really depends which one decides to pathfind in any given direction. They will typically end up pulling the other one. But of course, you can once again right-click with shears to get that lead off of them. The other thing to bear in mind is that leads and fireworks are now pretty much incompatible. Previously, it was possible to jump off of, let's say, a high place, activate your elytra, whatever animal you had leashed would follow you, and if you used fireworks to boost yourself into the air from there, it was possible to drag an animal pretty long distances. You saw me do this in the Froglight Farm episode not too long ago, where we transported frogs some pretty great distances. However, as I've lost height here, I could boost myself with a firework, but the lead will immediately snap, leaving that leashed chicken behind. So unfortunately, it's not really possible to boost yourself using fireworks when transporting a mob this way anymore, and if you want to glide with a mob just for the sake of the speed that elytra have when they travel, you will probably need to start from a much greater height. Get a tower of scaffolding up to world height, maybe bounce yourself up there with slime blocks or something if you want to. There are wind charge cannons that can propel you into the stratosphere. There are genuinely some ways of getting hold of a ridiculous amount of vertical lift. I don't know if all of them will preserve leads entirely, because leads do still have a snapping distance, but the mechanic of boosting yourself with rockets and flying a mob indefinite distances using leads has sort of been replaced with Happy Ghasts in general, and their ability to pilot stuff around with a boat as their cargo, which is honestly fine by me, because even though flight with elytra is a lot faster, the Happy Ghasts are a little bit slow, as we've already noted earlier in this episode. Flying with elytra was always kind of inconsistent and kind of finicky with leads, so their choices were either to remove that mechanic entirely to prevent a lot of player frustration, or to codify it so that players' leads when boosted with elytra would never break. And that would kind of make some of the stuff you can do with the Happy Ghast redundant, and I think the Happy Ghasts are just, frankly, a pretty cool addition to the game. And hopefully this has been a pretty cool introduction to them, but we're going to be doing a lot more with these little guys in the days and weeks to come. I am planning on making a series of like Ghast garages and parking spaces where we can simply glide them in, unload any cargo, and they'll just sit there happily until they're ready to be taken out into the world again. So I'm working on designs for those, but for now, I think this video has been a great introduction to Happy Ghast. Hopefully you agree. If you do, don't forget to leave a comment letting me know what you thought of this episode, and hopefully you're excited for the return of the Minecraft Survival Guide. The Misadventures series will also be continuing, so have no concerns about that. We're going to be getting back into that, hopefully, later this week. For now, folks, thank you so much for watching the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.